Let's welcome my man Andrew to the show. Hey Andrew, how you doing today?
Zigo, I'm good, brother. Thank you for having me. It's quite cold in Edmonton, Alberta, and northwestern Canada, compared to probably sunny Florida. But that means you got to choose to go to the gym inside instead of having a whole bunch of outdoor stuff to do, right? So it works out pretty.
Exactly. Exactly. I love it here in Florida. I moved here for a reason. I'm not comparing it to Alberta, but I used to live in Alabama, and it was a little cold, and it was too cold for me. So I moved a little bit closer to the equator. But with that being said, man, tell my audience about yourself and your work.
I've been a personal trainer, coach for over 12 years. A lot of in person. I do online. I have been getting a lot of speaking engagements the last little bit. You caught me in the middle of a 3-weekend in a row trip to 3 events. Just spoke at 2. So that stuff I love. I love traveling within the industry. You use the word author, and I'm going to pivot that to writer because I've never technically written a book yet, but I write for a bunch of fitness magazines, including Muscle Fitness Magazine, T Nation, Personal Trainer Development Center, Generation Iron, Barbend. There's a new one about to be announced, but until it's actually official on the website, I'll keep that one. Mum's the word. And I guess I'm also pretty active on Instagram, and people seem to find me there a lot. So anyway, it's a cool career. Very grateful to get to do what I do.
I found you there on Instagram as well. So, and you have a fantastic page, man, with awesome engagement, and the audience seems to love your work. So, I'm glad you're here, buddy. And with that being said, let's talk about your podcast because we introduced it already, like Live Free
Sure.
and Die Hard, right? So,
Yeah.
explain that to us.
So, I mean, again, I think a lot of your listeners are probably enthusiasts, and my podcast is probably a bit more geared towards coaches. I can't help it. Smart coaches will make sure that all of their media is geared towards the proper audience that they can help. But I can't help but enjoy conversations with some of my industry friends. We're talking about really successful people, whether it's Luca Hosvar or Don Saladino, and bringing them on and just having conversations that I enjoy. It's great to develop relationships even more on top of traveling to hang out with people. And as I said, it tends to be a podcast that's a bit more of stuff for trainers and the career side of things, which is more of an indulgence on my part. So, if someone's looking for more practical lifestyle stuff, it's not really the podcast. So in that sense, it's incongruent with everything, but that's what my social media is for. And then the stuff I write for the big magazines. So the podcast is just a fun outlet for me. And it's, I don't market anything to trainers. I don't sell mentorship or any of these sort of educational products. So it's kind of given back to people, supporting people, because I like giving and sharing and supporting without expecting anything in return, because the industry has been good to me and has given me a really great life. So that's the podcast in a nutshell.
So what I'm hearing is, if you want practical advice, listen to the Matter Over Mind experience. But
Sure.
then if you are a trainer, right, and the expert in the industry, listen to the Live Free and Die Hard podcast. That's kind of how I get it. So we get the best of both worlds there, the best of both worlds.
Absolutely.
But say that, let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about your Instagram, because I looked over your work and I decided to ask questions based on what I saw there.
Sure.
And something that you mentioned is workouts aren't meant to replace life, but enhance it. And I love that post. So explain that to my audience.
Well, we know that within the industry, people get tribal about everything. And we won't touch politics, but people get tribal about their politics. They get tribal about their nutrition. They have their diet in their bio on social media, and they will, they'll follow evidence, however good or bad that evidence is, or people who promote the same ideology as they do, and they will ignore disconfirming information and research that counters their sort of belief system. We know that's kind of how this works. So, people who are very, caught up in fitness and have made a devoted lifestyle of it, oftentimes they struggle with boundaries, and oftentimes fitness is replacing some other sort of poor boundary from the past, whether it's, partying lifestyle, drugs, alcohol, or just something else that they pivoted, and it almost becomes like an addiction. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's like this or that's necessarily a bad thing, but we probably should have moderation and boundaries in all things. And that includes not breaking ourselves apart, doing 3 to 4 hour long workouts every day one of the most important skills to develop for really, really dedicated people in fitness is the boundaries around rest, recovery, making sure you're getting enough sleep, you're not overly caffeinated, and giving your body enough time to rest, repair, so that you actually grow muscle and gain strength optimally. Muscle and strength are built as we recover, not as we're actually training in the gym. And I think there's a lot of people who struggle with, very extreme mindset, all or nothing behavior. And you open this all up by, practical stuff that will help people get more active. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is they get rooted in all or nothing thinking. You have to be perfect or you're totally off track. It has to be, if it's not a perfect pass thing, then you're failing. And when people set up these false dichotomies of being on and off the wagon, off and on and off track, they all too often struggle to maintain an unsustainable ideal over the long run, which then has them feeling like they're failing, which means that they give themselves permission to, quote, cheat on their diets. And that's complicated, that's loaded. It gives them permission to skip workouts. It gives them permission to just go off of a fit lifestyle. And what we really hope in all things is to find a moderation. I mean, you can be really aggressive with the stuff. You can really push if you got aggressive goals, but there still has to be room for everything else in life. And to your direct question, if we start turning down time with friends or family, and our obsession with fitness crowds out other healthy, normal lifestyle stuff, hobbies and interests, then we become very one-dimensional. But even more, it's very unsustainable. And I don't think it's actually a really healthy way to live our lives. It's not a healthy way to engage in relationships. And I mean, yeah, we can be prone to, extreme all in, falling in love with these type of things. But I want fitness to be something at least people, gives them better energy, feeling more confident, so that way they can then go out, and if they enjoy hiking, or if they just want to go and enjoy a weekend, go to a wedding and not have to bring Tupperware, and then they'd be able to eat whatever's at the wedding and have a few drinks without feeling guilt or, like really, really disordered eating, thinking, or even behavior. And just be able to enjoy life without the guilt. And that's challenging for a lot of people.
That is, because a lot of us, as you said, have the all or nothing mindset. Like going into even the new year, we're gun ho and say, hey, we're going to do this, right? But it's because you think of, okay, it's either I'm on, a couple of weeks later, this is terrible, it's not working out, and that does feel like, okay, I'm not going to do this, I can't do this anymore, which is really one of the issues. Someone said to me the other day, we're having a conversation, and I mentioned rum, and they said, you drink? And they were so surprised. They're like, you drink? And I'm like, yeah, I couldn't tell the last time I got drunk, and I don't drink too often. But I guess you would call me a social drinker if I'm out with family and friends having a good time. At the end of the day, we're here to live life. Doesn't mean you can't be healthy. There are places in the world, and I'm sure you know this, Andrew, they've done studies on where people live to be over 100 years old. They're all happy and stuff. They don't know a biohack if you hit them in the face, but they're happy. And that happiness helps them to live longer. And I'm not just saying, now go out there and drink and do whatever you want to kill your kidneys and be happy. That's not what I'm saying. However, I am saying that you have to live life. At the end of the day, that's what we're here for. And having that balance is going to help you going into the new year. So I'm glad that you shared that. That's absolutely fantastic. Now, let's carry that into the next part of the conversation, because we want to talk about energy and good energy and connecting with the right people. So what role does that play in our health and fitness journey?
Put that in context for me. I'm curious as to exactly where you want me to go with this.
So I want to look at it from the point of commitment, right? Not necessarily motivation, but commitment. So when we're talking about if you want to be successful in your health and your health and fitness journey, what's the importance of having the right motivational, positive people, the roles that they play in your life?
Well, I mean, there's a whole lot there. If you are around like-minded people who share your interests, who support this, then that's only going to encourage you. Something that I've encountered on occasion with clients over the years if you have an unsupportive spouse, I mean, I remember one particular client had a spouse that willfully sabotaged and interfered on a particularly nasty level. And unfortunately, that a client was doomed, and there was nothing I was able to do. You know, it did warrant a complicated discussion to point it out, but that was pretty much the end of all that. And of course, as a trainer, you also have to have boundaries around people who, you know, you don't want to ever quit on people. And I don't like this ideology of firing clients, but you also have to find the people that self-select to work with you who are a good fit. For the person who's trying to be more fit and active, if you have unsupportive, you know, partners or family, that can be tricky. And people will, it's good to recognize signs of sabotage. When I've had clients who, you know, they have a partner who claims that they're supportive, but that partner will relentlessly bring junk food and crap into the house. Sometimes it's because the partner has impulse control issues, in one particular example I could think of, or the partner just doesn't share the goals. But sometimes it's unintentional sabotage, often in workplaces. And it's really good to be able to recognize this. If you have someone in the office, proverbial office or literal, who is, quote, on a diet or started a fitness program, and all of a sudden other people in the office, they start bringing around things like donuts and other treats, and they start telling you to live a little. And hold on a second here. Good. And, you know, they don't respect the boundary. And what's actually happening sometimes it's well-intentioned, but sometimes it's someone else who is struggling with their own health and fitness efforts, who is all of a sudden now seeing a reminder that makes them feel very acutely aware of what they don't like about themselves, something they've been struggling with. And one of the easiest ways to make that uncomfortable feeling go away is to remove the stimulus by sabotaging the other person. And this is a very real thing. So it's important to recognize this stuff and establish pretty firm boundaries. And if someone violates those boundaries and just tells you to, oh, live a little, just enjoy it, or despite you saying, hey, no, you know, this is important to me, they keep bringing the stuff around in a, you know, having it there is one thing, but really kind of pushing it on you, that warrants some complicated conversations and an evaluation of our own relationship with our own boundaries. But it starts with recognizing this sort of sabotage. And sometimes it's very willful, and sometimes it's unintentional, but it still functions that way. And once we have that food around, especially if we haven't set ourselves up with a manageable, sustainable lifestyle that also includes enjoying other aspects of life, if we're wired to really restrictive dieting, hardcore workout regimes, and we're stuck in this all or nothing thinking, then all these decisions become fatiguing. There's a sort of like oversimplified belief that willpower is a finite resource. It functions that way. It's not quite the truth, but it's much easier to make decisions in line with our identity and who we see ourselves to be. So if we can foster an identity as someone who's fit, who's active, who eats well, or tap into the aspirational identity of wanting to do these things, then these choices become easier. We're less reliant upon willpower. If we have stress in our lives with work or family life or whatever's going on, then we are less likely to succumb to falling off track, getting into binging on food that probably isn't a good, you know, isn't in line with what we're doing. And we can be more vulnerable to these external sabotage, whether intentional or otherwise. So I think one of the most important skills we can develop, or things we can develop about this, is to look at our entire identity and try to build, strengthen that identity, tap into old identity. If, you know, if someone was more active in their younger days, back in high school, or they played sports, now if we can get back to that, or if we can look at people that we admire and aspire to be like, and get really in touch with that, it can make those decisions easy. And it's not about being perfect. It's about lessening the frequency and severity and duration of the negative episodes where we feel like we're a bit off track with our nutrition. It's the person who, you know, does pretty good with their nutrition during the week, but then Friday early evening comes, and then there's drinks, and then the food goes off track, and then Saturday there's a hangover, and it's like, well, I've blown it. So then Saturday and Sunday become a free-for-all, and then I'll get started again on Monday. It becomes Okay, Friday night we went out, we had some fun. It's okay to do that guilt-free. Let's get better at the skill of not overindulging. And then once Saturday comes around, let's get right back on track instead of giving ourselves permission to do it on Monday. And this is at the core of everything. You know, the message, like the personal responsibility message is unpopular, it's unwelcome at times, and it also lacks nuance. But at its core, we need to empower people and figure out ways that those people are more well equipped to embrace what they can control about things, instead of being told, hey, this is not your fault, you know, it's your genetics, it's the environment, blah blah blah, you're a victim to your circumstance. That's disempowering. That doesn't help people at all. We strip people of the ability to control some of this. So let's give those people that power back, but let's call bullshit when we see it. And let's go, yes, there are a lot of factors at play, and we get very emotionally fatigued, and we have food and marketing that's engineered to get people to consume. But we also give ourselves permission, and recognizing that is powerful. We are the ones who ultimately decide and give ourselves permission to go off track, to do the things that are against our goals. And if we can bring that back, then we can give ourselves permission to enjoy these things with less guilt. And then we're less likely to get into these cycles of guilt and shame, which have us seeking impulsive, hedonistic behaviors, which like alcohol, drugs is the ultimate example, or gambling. But even like, you know, binging on food is a short-term, you know, hedonistic, dopamine fueled boost, only to leave people feeling worse after the fact. It's about breaking these cycles and giving people a greater sense of control, and letting those people gradually gain more skill to where they're not perfect. They're not expecting to be perfect. They don't place pressure on themselves to be perfect, but they just feel like they have more power.
You know, you just said some really good things just a while ago, and my brain was kind of going off there for a second, because I always tell this story, right? Or kind of metaphor in a way, if you want to call it. Let's say two people walking through a gym and they see Andrew, right? He's fit, he looks good. One person may say, he might be on steroids. Yeah, he might just have good genetics. He works out all the time. He probably doesn't have a life and doesn't have wife and kids. The next person may look at Andrew and say, ooh, that man must be really dedicated at what he does. Two people look at you, two different opinions. Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, people bring their own stories, their own narratives, their own judgments into these things. And the person who looks for all the explanations as to why they can't is someone, to put it bluntly, is sort of a victim mindset, is very external locus of control, right? External locus control, we don't feel power. There's a very strong correlation with being unhappy and experiencing higher levels of stress if we don't feel in control of our own environment. It can get into learned helplessness even when we have the ability to change, we just don't. But people who look at it and see the positive side of things, they tend to look at things, well, these are the things that I could do. This is the power I do have in this situation. And those are invariably the people who are more successful. Now, we can change our narratives and our mindsets. We absolutely can. And it's also very valuable, and going back to your previous question, to try to surround ourselves more and more with people who see the world that way.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I agree. That's one, when I started to work on my health and change my life around, I had to make sure I surround myself with people who are not quote unquote perfect, but would help me in that journey. When I decided to get my certifications in nutrition and fitness and launch a podcast, I surrounded myself with those same people as well. And I have newer podcasters who reach out to me, say, hey, Narad, you've been doing this for a while. Hey, you have anything you can help me with? Let's talk. And I collaborate. And I'll interview people who just launched their show last week, and help them out, because, you're now creating that community where you're building and you're helping each other. And that's absolutely vital. And that's which is going to lead us to the next piece of my question. Let's talk about consistency a little bit, right? It's not just motivation and quote unquote willpower, but consistency. What are some basic habits to create consistency?
I mean, I'm trying to think even where to start with this. It's a lot of the stuff we already said. It's about reasonable expectations. It's about, starting with one or a very, very small number of habits. I mean, this is classic, almost cliche advice that, and I think it's not necessarily universal. I think there are people that can, switch modes and be a bit more aggressive, I do think sometimes those people tend to be prone to more on and off type behavior. And whenever we have an on mode, there's, by contrast, always an off mode, and people give themselves permission to go into off mode. So that's a bit of an issue. But, classic habit building stuff, books like Atomic Habits by James Clear is a great resource, Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. These things will help teach people the skills of building new habits, establishing that as a bit more of an ingrained behavior before we move on to more things we're trying to do, or more elaborate things that we try to do. And the classic is we still focusing on, I like to get people to focus on just getting to the gym and getting the workout in. We don't overcomplicate with nutrition right away. Once the habit of the gym is in there, I tend to find a lot of people just naturally, without prompting, just are interested in eating better anyway. So that starts to gain some momentum. And then we can talk about things like, hey, just drink a little bit more water. I really like focusing on getting people to eat more protein. If we can get people to, a very basic one is, every meal has got to be built around protein. What do we have? We have people generally making healthier choices. We have more filling meals. And more filling meals means we're less likely to probably overeat on very, very high calorie food. And then we just see how this stuff starts to add up a little bit. And then as someone, I'm very reluctant as a coach to tell people what to do, even though people come to you to have you tell them what to do. Realistically, a great coach will ask a lot of questions, and it will help draw out the choices from the person. And when people make decisions themselves, if they're the ones who make the choice and the decision, they're far more likely to execute on it and stay consistent with those choices. So a great coach just keeps bringing that stuff to the forefront, asking a lot of, you got to be careful how you frame why, but getting people to understand why they're doing these things and what people think are the solutions to their own challenges. And very often they know the answers. And when they're willing to execute on those answers, because we remove barriers, or we, in a very collaborative way, create solutions to their challenges, that's when we start building momentum and getting people to be successful.
Love it. I absolutely love it. And you're right. That's one of the philosophies in my coaching as well, is I ask a lot of questions and let my clients decide. Now they'll come to me and say, hey, what's a good source of protein? Hey, what carbs are complex? Can you send me a guide on so-and-so? And they'll come into me and get curious, right? So asking these questions, but I guide them along that path till they get there where they're making the decisions themselves, because they're more likely to stick to it. So I think you're definitely right. One of my friends and I were joking the other day. She says, with her husband, if she tells him to do something, he won't do it. So she makes him think it's his idea. And then he'll do it.
Classic relationship stuff. Yeah. And smart people figure this shit out, right? It's not much different when we're dealing with our clients.
Exactly. And with that being said, everyone, this has been a fantastic episode so far, but your boy's coming up on the hack of the episode. So, and as promised, we're going to give it to you. But before we do it, because I'm such a nice guy, I have to talk to you about something today, everyone. I have to talk to you about Heal. See, Amino Co., they produce Heal, which is 100% science-backed essential amino acid formulation designed to reduce recovery times and improve physical function by accelerating muscle repair while helping you maintain a healthy inflammatory response. See, the EAA profile of Heal was originally developed to help NASA astronauts maintain muscle mass in space, and was then refined to help everyday people experiencing prolonged periods of inactivity. So Heal, I drink it pretty much every day. I train 7 days a week, some type of training, and I drink it in the evenings post-recovery, because it has whey protein concentrate, it has creatine, and also the specific blend of essential amino acids, which helps me to heal and recover so I can go at it the next day. See, a recent clinical trial compared 1 scoop and 2 scoop amounts of Heal with high quality whey protein. The net balance whole protein synthesis and breakdown were measured, and the response to Heal was found to be 3 times larger than whey protein on a gram-to-gram basis. So go ahead and check it out. The website is aminoco.com/ZecoHealth. Of course, you know the code ZecoHealth is going to give you 30% off all the amino-based products Heal that I'm drinking right now. along with Perform, which I drink pre-workout. And of course, the link will be in the description of the episode. Now, with that being said, we're here to the hack of the day. My man Andrew here is going to lay it on us. What are some of the biggest mistakes people make when beginning their fitness journey?
What are the big mistakes? I mean, number one, they try to do too much. And I think we kind of tackled that a little bit recently. Two, I think that they look for rigid ideologies and systems, whether it's, hey, everybody's talking about keto dieting or intermittent fasting or whatever. And fine, different nutritional ideologies can be useful under certain circumstances if it fits that person's lifestyle. But the danger is most of the people who are being drawn to these things, or the people who are evangelizing them, that's a very big red flag, are not the type of people who can use them sustainably. So there's a problem. And oftentimes, if someone around you is evangelizing, and I use that word very deliberately, a diet like keto or carnivore or something else that's rigid with rigid rules, it's usually to try to reinforce their own belief system. And then if they're evangelizing, it quite literally functions like a religion. And a lot of people are very hardcore about diets like vegan or keto or carnivore. They take on a tribal religion-like identity, I suppose. So I would just be very careful about that sort of stuff. I would try to learn, the evidence basis of things like keto, why keto and intermittent fasting, they work because they restrict calorie intake. That fundamentally is it. There's no special properties of either of these diets that somehow have superior fat loss, results. When equated, research on this stuff's very clear. When calories and protein and fiber are equated compared to other approaches to nutrition, the fat loss results are the same. There are wild claims about different health benefits. Those are not supported by the evidence. And in fact, there may be some problems, especially long-term with things like keto dieting. We want to be very careful about that. I would definitely talk to a doctor, especially a cardiologist, if you're really serious about that. I'll leave that at that. I think following someone like Dr. Lane Norton. Lane is great. We both spoke at a conference 2 weeks ago. Lane is one of the best evidence-based minds when it comes to nutrition. And I think people also get really caught up in, I know you just, have a sponsor, but I do have to be honest in saying, like, being focused on things like supplements over the basics of, of nutrition, of hydration, of sleep, of exercise. Those are the big rocks. And then we can layer in thoughtful nutritional supplementation once we take care of the big things first. So that's a big one. And I still think all or nothing thinking is a big problem. People tend to, especially because we're approaching the new year. And I don't want to discourage people who start in a new year, because I think a lot of people are successful regardless of the month that they start. But we have this culture around giving it a fair try during the new year. Someone decides, all right, I'm going to start working out. They're going to do something extreme. They're going to start dieting. They're trying to do way too much and not graduating themselves into sustainable habits. And then what happens is they join the gym, they go for a little while, they fall off track. And then they say to themselves, well, I tried, I just can't do this. Very external locus control thinking again. And then they're absolved. They made the effort. So now they're trying to alleviate the guilt, the feelings of shame for feeling unhealthy, not feeling good about themselves, having gained weight over the course of the year or several years. And then they just kind of resign themselves to saying, well, I can't do anything about this. I clearly tried. It didn't work. So therefore, that's it. And then they go back, to the proverbial couch and the snack food. And I think we can live in between that. We can approach it with a bit more nuance, and and it becomes finding good resources, whether online or maybe it's hiring an in-person coach, of people who can help shed a light on more manageable and nuanced nutrition, reasonable approaches to fitness without, doing hours and hours of cardio. I don't think most beginners really need to crush themselves at cardio. You can do a little bit if you enjoy it. I think learning to enjoy working out, lifting weights, getting in the gym, I think it'd be a wonderful gift to yourself, to your future self. And there's a tactic I like. I've shared this concept before. we are terrible at delayed gratification. We are terrible at making decisions for our long-term well-being, whether it's financial saving or whether we're eating or any of these things, drinking, drugs, you name it. We're sacrificing a night of sleep because we decided we're going to stay up and scroll, TikTok. But if we start looking at, well, instead of our future self, a year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, being this abstract, far off place, picture that person, you in the future, create an image in your mind. Think about the person who you will be as time gets there, as a real person. And that's also a person who's very vulnerable to the choices that you make right now on an ongoing basis. And again, it's not about being perfect. It's about being kind and reasonable to that person. So to find balance so we can enjoy life, reasonable life now, but we can also set that future version of ourselves up for a better quality of life, and not screw that person over royally by gaining as much body fat as possible, and then facing down increased risk of lifestyle diseases like diabetes and heart disease and what have you. And occasionally you'll get someone who gets in this really extremist narrative that there's no relationship between level of body fat and long-term health outcomes. And that is a malicious lie based out of a extremist ideological group that does not have your best interest in mind. So if anybody's listening who kind of brushes up against this stuff, the people who are peddling this lie are not your friends. They're not out to help you. They're peddling nonsense and pseudoscience. And while the complete inverse, which is shame-based narratives that pressure people to lose weight, are equally ineffective, and they're not helping anybody, right? There's good research on that. We also have to discard this lie that there aren't serious risks long-term of, very, very major health issues if we do not try to manage our level of our body fat and our cardiovascular health. And those things tend to go fairly hand in hand. Yes, there's a narrative that you can't look at someone and be able to tell how healthy they are. Yes, that's true, but that obscures the real problem. We do have, rising levels. I don't know if statistically we're still seeing rise at obesity. We still have very high levels. I think it's rising. And we have more pressure on the healthcare system. I mean, my grandfather's been dead for quite some time. He'd probably be about 100 if he were alive today. He was a doctor, but he was a 4-pack a day smoker. He was a really good man, but he also was overweight. He drank a lot, and the way they ate, that was their generation. But he died due to complications of diabetes because he had to have his leg amputated, and then his organs started shutting down. And that was the direct result of a lot of lifestyle behavior. And that's the thing that these ideological extremists don't want to talk to you about or take responsibility for. So just a word of caution in dealing with the type of people who pursue these extremist narratives. And these extremist narratives tend to go hand in hand with a lot of other extreme ideology. So that's as much as I want to say on that topic. It's complicated and tends to get some particularly vicious, nasty, shame-based antagonism in return.
You just touched on some beautiful, beautiful things though, Andrew. I mean, come on. Like, really, these are the things that I preach on the Matter for Mind experience. These are the things that I live. I've talked about my asthma and putting my asthma in remission and dropping my blood pressure by 10 points. And Andrew, I've never been like obese my entire life. I was fit but still had health issues. And I had to learn to make certain changes. You're talking about dieting. I want to talk about that for a minute. Because we talk about keto, we talk about intermittent fasting and so on and so forth, right? We don't realize that these are tools that can be used to get your results. When I had to heal my gut, I had to train my body to run on fat. Then I had to be on keto diet for a little while to heal my gut. Intermittent fasting was important for that. The way I training in zone 2, allow my body to burn more fat, you know what I'm talking about, Andrew, was important in that aspect as well, right? These are tools that we can use from an evolutionary standpoint. Our bodies are designed to be able to run on fat time to time, run on carbs from time to time. These extreme ideas, like you're saying, is really anyone that says to me, you need to be a carnivore and be in ketosis for every rest of your life. If anybody says that to you, turn around, run away, and don't even look back, because this person have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And that's when the all or nothing mindset come in, because we're like, oh, this work, this doesn't work. Let's talk even about supplementation that we just talked about. I eat at least 200 grams of protein a day. I also train 7 days a week. So, but I also use supplements as needed to give me that extra boost to help me to recover and perform better. I'm sure you do as well. But we do it, but we already have a certain lifestyle intact. Like, I've had people come to me and say, what are the best supplements for this? I said, first of all, what's your diet like? Because supplementation is adding to something you're already doing. It's a supplement. It's not a replacement for what you should be doing. So you just touch on some beautiful things. And you talk about having the right people in your life to help to keep you going with the right mindset, not to motivate you, but to keep you on that path. Because motivation can sometimes, in a way, be short term, depending on the way you think about it. But to be there for you, to help you to have the right mindset, help you with your identity. I don't know if you're a sports guy, Andrew, but I'm a big sports guy. And the best teams in the world usually have an identity. We talk about the Dallas Cowboys. I'm a Cowboys fan. Every time the Cowboys struggle, I'm like, we don't have an identity. What kind of team are we? When you have an identity, you tend to perform better. And that happens with people as well. So you just touched on some wonderful things, my man. That was absolutely banging and great advice. And with that being said, anything you want to tell my audience, let them know how to get in touch with you, learn more about your work, et cetera, et cetera.
I appreciate it. I mean, first of all, for your longtime listeners, if you're obviously enjoying Zico's podcast, go give him a review. Go share this with someone in your world, a friend, right? It's a simple way that doesn't cost you anything to actually support, especially if it's brought a lot of value to you. If you're someone who has found you through my media, just scroll through what else what other guests you've had. And if you see someone that you like, go listen to that too. If someone wants to check out more of what I'm doing, you're always welcome to message me. Instagram is the way. I don't tell people to email me because I hate email. But just message me on Instagram. I respond to everything. And it's at Andrew Coates Fitness. There are imposter accounts and these things have been rampant and they're just scammers. So be careful. Look for the account that has, I'm just a little over 90,000 followers. And you can tell by scrolling down that, I've been posting for a very long time instead of one of these accounts that just popped up and shared a dozen of my posts and it's all within the last 24 hours, right? Screw that stuff. Yeah, just message me there. And anything else I do, anything I get published or, other podcast episodes, I share it all on my Instagram, my website, www.andrewcoatesfitness.com. But yeah, just go hang out on Instagram and we'll chat there. Thank you.
And I love his page. That's where I found Andrew, was on his Instagram. And of course, that his contact information will be in the show notes. And this should be no surprise to anybody. It's going to be zicohealth.com/livefreediehard. And of course, the show notes is going to be in the description of the episode. And with that being said, we're out of here today.